Good afternoon. I'm Engineer Michael Jan Septimo, and today we'll be discussing about traffic safety, especially about pedestrians. But we will also tackle some safety processes or procedures that happens involving vehicles. No. So for our program of activities, so we will have a short introduction, and then the introduction to pedestrian traffic safety, gap acceptance concepts, and then critical gap, short break, and then the post-encroachment time. And we also have the pedestrian traffic conflict analysis and pedestrian accident severity. Short quiz, question and answer portion, and some closing remarks. No? So depending on how we progress along the lesson, so this timetable may not really reflect the actual time where we will start them. No? Can start earlier than what was stated here or a little bit later. Okay, so let's proceed with the pedestrian traffic safety. Okay, so pedestrians are one of the most vulnerable road users. Then according to World Health Organization, so about 1.3 million people die each year as a result of road traffic crashes. And about more than half of all road traffic deaths are among pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. Because when you compare them, let's say for other vehicles like cars, trucks, and then yung mga passenger cars na o jeepneys, they are more protected, no? So let's say sabihin natin yung cyclist at saka yung motorcyclist, meron naman din silang helmet, any other gears that could protect them. However, they are not necessarily the most safe, no, in terms of protection. So the vehicle itself, no, is some sort of protection. So that's why involving motorists and then car users, let's say for example, the most vulnerable is the motorcyclist. Even he has a helmet, so the mere fact na pwede siyang i-overturn, topple, o patalsikin ng car is already an indication, no, of how severe that the accident could become. But more if it is pedestrians. No? So pedestrians, they don't really have any sort of protection. No? Though yung mga vehicle users, meron din naman silang driver that could potentially be harmed during an accident. The accident they occur or the damage they occur is more on the minor side most of the time. Okay. So road traffic safety refers to the methods and measures used to prevent road users from being killed or seriously injured. So this is a general term. No? It's not necessarily for pedestrian. Road users can mean mga drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, so lahat ng gumagamit ng road. No? And then you can also categorize yung mga approach natin sa road safety into two. So we have the reactive approach and the proactive approach. No? So let's start with the reactive approach. So reactive approach does not necessarily mean na kapag may accident and then dun mo lang siya susolusyonan after the fact. That's not necessarily the point of reactive approach. No? Do not take it too negatively. So there are cases wherein ganun nga yung nangyari. So nagkaroon ng accident and then ginawa na analysis. But this reactive approach paved way for a much safer, let's say, road in the future. So do not take it too negative, no? Okay? So most of the time, the data that we gather from this study for reactive approach comes from the Philippine National Police, no? And then using those data, you can plot yung mga tinatawag nating accident hotspots, no? Kasi dun sa records ng PNP, meron na ako nakitang example. So, nare-record naman nila yung kung ano yung nangyari, and then kung saan siya nangyari, and even the coordinates, no? If you have knowledge on GIS or plotting those coordinates, you can track which are the accidents, no? So, hindi lang siya basta-basta pedestrian. All of accidents nandun. But you just have to filter them out on your own. So, you can make the pedestrian, let's say, for example, dito, hotspots, and then let's say yung vehicle collision hotspots. So, you can do that using those data. However, there are some disadvantages, no? So, for one, they are considered as historical data. So that means they take time to build up. So hindi ka makakagawa ng study using data, let's say, ngayon lang marami na aksidente, and you want to see the trend, but it only happened this year. So wala kang pwedeng pagbasihan ng mga studies mo. Okay? And then all accidents are occurrences, no? Posible na ganito yung mangyari, no? This year, you have 5 accidents on the same area. But the following, before that, mga 1, 2, 3 years ago, wala naman nangyayari. So it's hard to come up with a decent study involving that area. Kasi kung wala talagang nangyaring accident or irregular yung accident during the, at that area, no? Some accidents go unreported. This is not uncommon, no? So this is pretty common even siguro dun sa mga malayong lugar or even abroad, no? So if an accident can be resolved on the spot, syempre yung police hindi na nila papakialaman yan. So pwede na nilang sabihin na sige, bahala na kayo, just resolve it on your own. So at least yung iba kasi ayaw nila magkaroon ng record, no? Dun sa police. And then yung iba rin, ayaw na nilang ma-hassle. So kung pwede na nilang i-solve on the spot, they will do that. They will know there's no need to call for police. So sometimes yung area, pwede mong marinig sa mga tao nandun, prone sa accident. But when you check the records, wala naman nakalagay. So this is part of those cases, no? So data found in records are more geared for law enforcement than engineering, no? So I don't know for every data, no? So let's say yung example na lang dito is for yung dun sa records no sa PNP. Siyempre, they are for law enforcement. Siyempre, yung data na ilalagay nila is more usable for them, no? So not necessary, kung tayo yung kumuha nun, siyempre yung kukunan din natin is what is necessarily for us. So that's not wrong on their part, no? They're just doing their job, and then they're just doing the job using their expertise, no? So parang nakikigamit lang tayo ng data dun sa na nakuha nila. So there are some parts there that you can use. Like yung nasabi ko nga yung mga coordinates, and then syempre dahil nga for law enforcement, yung pagkaka-describe nila na nangyari, importante para sa mga law enforcement. But you sometimes hindi mo makikita dun yung mga kailangan mo. Okay? So medyo mahihirapan tayong i-filter out yung data nila. And then we also have, it requires a large amount of data. So dapat nga maraming naka-record para magawa mo siya ng study. So now let's proceed with the gap acceptance concepts, no? Okay, so the definition of gap can be described, no, between vehicles or even pedestrians. So for the first one is for vehicles. So gap is a measure of time. So tandaan nyo yan, it's time. So ibig sabihin, hindi siya talaga, pag sinabi kasi natin gap, ang una pumapasok, parang distance, no? So most of the time, gap is time. Meron kasing mga cases din nga na tinatawag nila yung gap na gap distance. Pero kung wala namang indication, it is assumed that it's time, no? The time between the rear bumper of the first vehicle and the front bumper of the second vehicle. So for vehicles, ito yun, no? So meron tayo illustration dito kung saan makikita yung gap. And then, for pedestrians, so not necessarily na pedestrians lang, no? Involving dun sa vehicle and pedestrians, no? So it is defined as the time difference between two successive pedestrians, taken from the moment the first pedestrian has cleared the conflict area until the second one reaches the conflict area. So we have here this illustration. So makikita natin, yung isang pedestrian dyan has already cleared the conflict area. And then, yung susunod, papasok na dun sa crosswalk. So yung distance, yung time na pagitan nila, yun yung tinatawag natin gap. No? So we also have what we call the lag. So lag is defined as the time needed for a pedestrian to reach the conflict area. So it's possible kasi na wala namang nauna sa yung pedestrian doon sa crosswalk. O kaya nakatawid na. So may iwan na lang nun na nasa crosswalk ay ikaw, kung ikaw yung tumatawid. So bibilangin na lang nun ay yung time na hanggang makapunta ka doon sa conflict area. No? Not necessarily bibilangin pa yung time na kung kailan may darating na pedestrian na kasunod mo. So hindi yan. So yun yung lag. Sometimes sa mga studies, pinagko-combine na nila yung gap at saka yung lags. No? No, kasi parang technically, they can be used, parang gap na rin yung kino-consider na rin siyang parang gap eh. No? So gap acceptance is a well-known method to study the manner in which drivers move in a priority area where they must give way to other road users. Road users in this case could be other vehicles or pedestrians. So yung gap acceptance, yung ability ng driver to decide, no? Kung kaya niya bang lumusot doon sa time na allotted para sa kanya, no? Given doon sa meron tayong dalawang, let's say, pedestrians, kung meron ba siya, let's say, 5 seconds, kaya niya bang lumusot? Or confident ba siya? No? Tatanggapin niya ba yon or i-reject? So this study, this lesson, part of the lesson, consists of that, no? Accepting or rejecting gaps. So we have pedestrian origins, no? So pedestrian origins, so pedestrian can come from the near side or the far side. Meron tayong illustration dyan. So if you are in the Philippines, most likely yung mga pedestrians towards the right are the near side, no? Kasi mas malapit sila sa sasakyan, no? And then towards the other lane or other approach or direction is the far side. So some people kasi may attempt to study the gap acceptance depending on where they originated. So in different countries, especially Japan, they consider those studies, no? So nakita ko yung example is for in drivers natin, for nasa left side kasi yung ano nila lane na ginagamit. So I have to make a illustration suited for yung sa atin. So basically ganito rin yun, no? So sila kasi ina-isolate nila yung mga cases. So depending on the type of study. May mga study na pinagsasama na lang silang lahat-lahat. They just consider them pedestrians. But in their case, they have studies wherein they consider where the pedestrians came from and then kung gaano siya nakaka-affect doon sa gap acceptance ng mga drivers. So these are the following cases, no? So we have lags from the near side of the crosswalk. So ito yun, for example. So nanggaling siya sa near side, yung pedestrian. So lag siya kasi wala naman siyang naunang pedestrian. And then we also have the lags from the far side of the crosswalk. Okay, so ito yun. And then gaps between two pedestrians approaching from the near side of the crosswalk. So parang yung kanina lang na lag. So kaya lang meron nang nauna sa kanya. Parang lulusot siya sa pagitan nila. And then we also have gaps between two pedestrians approaching from the far side of the crosswalk. And then for the last one, gaps between a pedestrian approaching from the near side of the crosswalk and another one approaching from the far side of the crosswalk. So salubong. So this is an example, no? So pwedeng makikita nyo dyan yung distance nila pag malayo. But in reality, dahil pares salubong sila, yung gap time nila could be deceiving, no? So mabilis kasing lumiliit yung space. So here is an example, no? Nung ano natin, no? So this is taken from a software called Kinovea. Kumuha lang ako ng parang sample video from YouTube na parang gagawin natin ng analysis. So itong Kinovea kasi na to is just a free software, no? To process videos. Technically, it's not meant to be for transportation. It's for sports. But some functions of this software could be used to analyze yung mga transportation measures natin, no? So in this case, so ginamit ko lang naman to for illustration. Recording gaps does not necessarily kailangan ng video processing software. But sometimes it makes it easier. Lalo na itong software na to is just free. So ginagawa ko pa lang naman dito sa video, so nilalayout ko lang yung conflict area for visual purposes, no? Then fast forward natin. So naglalagay ako niyan ng parang stopwatch kasi ma-measure natin yung gap acceptance. So pwede rin kayong maglagay ng stopwatch for the gap rejected. So it's all up to you. Okay, so i-start ko tong na-post ko, sorry. Yan. So itong gagawin ko rito niyan, so i-start ko tong timer na to kapag nakatawid na yung mga pedestrians. So ito kasing sample ng video natin, hindi masyadong malawak yung pinapakita. So hindi natin nakikita na nag-approach ng vehicle. So I just assume na naglakad sila, meron ng vehicle na papasok dito sa crosswalk na to na dadaan, no? So let's see. So the moment this step out or step into the crosswalk, so simulan natin yung timer. Ito nasa left side, no, yung titignan nyo. Okay, so nagsimula na siya maglakad. So ang gagawin ko niyan, start ko na yung stopwatch, no? And then, not necessarily titigil ko siya kapag may dumaan na, no? So i-continue ko pa rin siya kasi for every pedestrian, pwedeng posible na maraming mga vehicles yung nag-accept or nag-reject. So, pakita na lang natin dito. Okay? So in this case, in-accept ng vehicle yung gap. So not necessarily that is called the 3.56 second gap. Hindi yon, no? Mamaya kasi pag nakarating na sila doon sa conflict area, yun yung gap ng unang vehicle. So makikita niyo yan, no? And then next, meron na naman tayong vehicle. So inuulit ko, itong 3.16, hindi yan yung accepted gap niya. Malalaman pa lang natin yun kapag yung pedestrian na to nakarating doon sa conflict area. So itong pangatlo na to for the upcoming vehicle yan, no? Okay. So ano ko, ulit natin. Then for the upcoming vehicle. So sa part niya, halos wala na siyang gap, no? So we can just assume na yung gap na reject niya, no? Kasi yung presented na gap sa kanya is approximately 0. So makikita natin dito na yung pinakaunang vehicle kanina, inaccept niya yung gap na 10.12 seconds. And then yung sumunod sa kanya, in-accept niya yung 6.32 seconds. And then yung pinahuli, in-accept niya yung 2.64. And then itong red na car, pagdating niya kasi doon, wala nang gap. So, nireject niya. So, nireject niya yung gap na approximately 0 second. Okay? So, yun lang yung gusto ipakita dyan. No? So, kapag marami kasing pedestrian, we just consider them, lalo na kung sabay-sabay sila, as one group, no? Or as one sample. Kunyari, 4 yun or 5 kanina. So, hindi natin isa-isa yun yung times 4, times 5. We just consider them as one. Ganon din sa car, no? Kung magkakasunod talaga sila na parang magkakadikit, so pwede nating i-assume na yung pinakauna lang yung re-record natin. Kasi parang platoon na sila ng mga vehicles. So, it is not really an indication of gap. So, we just have to filter those data out. Okay? So, now let's discuss critical gap. So, by definition, marami kasi definition yung critical gap. But in this case, ang gagamitin lang nating definition na ito. No? Ang definition na to ay galing kay Raff. So, defined by graph, defined as the gap for which the number of accepted gaps shorter than it is equal to the number of rejected gaps longer than it. Okay? Napakasimple lang, no? So, parang mga problems yan. Dito tayo nadadali. No? Lalo na siguro yung nakapag-take na dyan ng board exams. Alam mo i-solve yung problem pag nakita mo yung mga numbers, pero dun sa English, dun tayo namamatay. So, para ma-solve natin to, o maintindihan natin to, meron tayong illustration. No? So, example, bago yung illustration, kailangan meron muna tayong konting alam na mga concepts. Okay? So, in this case, meron tayong tinatawag na time-space diagram. So, sa time-space diagram, makikita natin dyan yung distance along the mainstream or distance and then the time. And then itong slope ng mga dito ng tawag ko rito yung yan. So, nakikita natin dito, meron tayong time-space diagram. So, makikita natin dito yung distance along mainstream at saka yung time. So, itong slope na to, yan, yung mga yan, may slope yan. So, yan yung speed ng mga vehicles, no? So, mas pataas yung the term steep ba yun? Mas steeper yung slope. That means the vehicles move very fast. So, ibig sabihin, they cover a lot of distance in a very short time. So, ganun yung indication ng isang time-space diagram. So, muna natin yan. And then, kung gusto nyo siya masyadong maintindihan, meron tayong illustration dito. So, sa illustration na to, makikita natin, ito yung distance along mainstream. Ayan, saka ito. So, isipin nyo ito yon mula rito hanggang doon. Okay? So, itong vehicle na to, so parang papasok siya dito sa persada na to. No? So, parang hahanap siya ng gap na kailangan niyang i-accept. So, we can see that on the time-space diagram dito. So, dahil dito sa part na to, hindi naman talaga siya magta-travel dito. Ito yung movement niya. Hindi naman yung distance along mainstream. So, makikita nyo, parang steady lang siya. Until makapasok siya dun sa mainstream. Dito. Okay? So, dun pa lang natin siya makikita talaga kung ano yung speed niya. So, makikita natin dito na merong mga gaps na most likely i-reject ng mga drivers. No? For example, ito, napakaliit ng gap. Napakaliit. And then, so, makikita natin dito, ito yun, no? Gap. Makikita natin, at this time, pumasok to sa, natin, sa study area. Then after a few seconds, pumasok na yung susunod na vehicle. So itong mga to, yun yung tinatawag nating mga gap, no? Gap na. So meron lang certain amount of gap that most vehicles would most likely accept. So ito yun, no? So we can call this the critical gap, no? So pwede rin natin siyang i-compare sa pedestrian. But I usually use this image because this is something that we can relate most of the time. Okay? So ito gap din yan, no? Pero nakapasok ng vehicle, so that's not necessarily important. Okay? So it's possible na magkaroon tayo ng multiple rejected gaps and isang accepted gap, but not vice versa. You cannot accept gaps, let's say, in the same area twice. But you can reject as many gaps as you want. Provided na hindi ka mahuhuli for causing extreme traffic. No? So let's clear this all up. Okay, and then let's proceed dun sa next part. So this is an example of the table for the gaps, no? So in the first column, we have the length of the gap, which is measured in seconds. Okay, so ito yan. So seconds. So yung paglalagay ng gap na yan, you just have to filter them into time in intervals of 1 second, no? Or if you want to be strict, you 0.5 nyo. Pero this is already okay, no? So hindi kasi natin i-record dyan na paisa-isa na 0.17, 0.16, 1.25. It will make the analysis much harder. So you just input the gaps that you found in your study. Ayan. So siguro dun sa study that is used for the example, hanggang 6 lang naman yung gap na meron siya. And then you list the number or count the number of accepted gap less than 3 seconds. So tingnan natin. So meron bang gap na mas maliit pa sa 0? So wala naman. So wala naman nag-accept yan. Kung meron man, nabangga siya. And then, let's say 1 second. So this is not a very realistic na graph, no? So this is just used for a illustration purposes, no? Do not take it seriously. 1 second na gap, masyado siya maliit. No? So may nag-accept na 2. And then dito, so titignan nyo, less than 1 second. No? So bibilangin mo lahat ng gap less than 1 second. So meron dalawa. And then dito, accepted gap less than 2 seconds. So pasok dyan. No? So from 0 to 1.99 seconds, ilista mo yung number of gaps doon kung ilan. And then do it for all in the data set or kung ano man nilagay mong gap dyan. Do it for all. And then, dun din sa number of rejected gaps, so gawin mo rin yung ginawa mo dito sa column, no? So, number of rejected but greater than 3 seconds, so kabaliktaran naman. So, ilan yung nag-reject ng 0 to 6 seconds? So, 116. Then, magiging equal siya. And then, at the end, magiging 0. So, one thing that you need to understand, so bakit parehas yung number of accepted gap at saka rejected gap? Di ba in-establish natin na last slide na you can reject multiple number of gaps but not accept multiple number of gaps, no? So hindi pwedeng para equal talaga sila in general sense. So in this study kasi, sometimes you have to filter out, no? Sa study used for this example, it inassume na only the first gap ang i-record, no? So, let's say in-accept niya, that means yung gap accepted, kunyari meron 2.5 seconds. In-accept niya yan, so i-record niya na accepted gap ay 2.5 seconds. Accepted gap. And then i-record niya na rejected gap doon sa first vehicle na yon ay 0. Okay, so yung time na rejected niya ay 0. Okay? So, wala kasing ano doon. gap time. Okay? So, kung maraming sunod-sunod na vehicles yan, kunyari ito, sunod-sunod. Okay? And then, sabihin natin, pedestrians pala, sorry. No? Kunyari vehicles na lang kasi yung example natin kanina. Nandito siya. Nireject niya yon. So, dito sa study itong ginawa niya, mineasure niya na yung gap ng pinakauna. Okay? So, kung nireject niya yan, let's say 1.5, nireject niya. So, hindi niya na yun isasama dun sa yung iba pang nireject. Parang, i-filter out niya na yan until na mag-accept siya. So, let's say may dumating dun na gap dito that is 5 seconds and yun yung in-accept niya. So, i-record na rejected gap is 1.5 and then yung i-record na accepted gap is 5. So, paano by pairs sila, no? So, kaya yung number of accepted at saka rejected gap nag-equal. Okay? So, now, we can plot So, ginagawa yun para hindi ganun sobrang daming nare-record mong data. Okay? So, we can now plot, no, yung the number of accepted gaps with also accepted or rejected gaps with respect to the time, no, yung inaccept nilang gap or ni-reject. Okay, so ipa-plot natin yan. Let's say pinakauna 0 and 0, yun siya. For 1 second, meron tayong 2. And then for 2 seconds, 12, and then so on for accepted, no? And we will also plot the number of rejected gaps, no? So they have to be on the same table or graph, sorry. So para makita natin yung sinasabi ni Raf na definition. So by definition of Raf is the number of accepted gap greater than it, shorter than it is equal to the number of rejected gaps greater than it. Okay? So ito ba yun? Ito yun, no? Ito yung time. So ito yung time kung saan the number, so saan ba makikita natin number of accepted and rejected? Ayun. So yan. So the number of gaps accepted shorter than it is equal to the number of the rejected gaps greater than it. So ito yun. So equal sila. Okay? So ano ba yung gap time o yung gap na yan? So i-project lang natin dun sa baba. So, and we approximate, no? Based from the graph, no? So, let's say, na-calculate ko na siya. And ang lumitaw ay ito. Clear lang natin, no? So, ito yung lumitaw. Ayan. So, let's say nakuha kong critical gap ay 3.1 seconds. So, that means, so, yung gap that the drivers will most likely accept is somewhere around 3.1 seconds. Okay? So, they will most likely accept na yung greater na gap dyan. So, we can also solve it using our solving skills, no? So, ang gagawin natin, saan ba nakuha yung mga value na yun? So, we will isolate this area. This part pala, no? Ba, isipin nyo area yung kinukuha. No? So, we will isolate this area. Ang area na to. So, makikita nyo, meron tayong parang hourglass na itsura dyan, no? Yung patulad na nakikita natin dito sa right side. Okay? Drawing ko lang yung ibang parts. Yan. So, though parang somewhat curvy siya, we will assume that as a straight line, no? Para mapadali yung computations natin. Okay? So, first, we need to know the lengths, no? Kailangan nating alamin yung mga lengths nito. Ito, at saka nito. Okay? Because this is somewhat of a kung assume natin that this is a line, straight line, at saka ito, straight line na lang, for easier computations, parang katulad nito, we can assume that those two as similar triangles. So in order for us to solve that similar triangle, kailangan makuha natin itong mga lengths na to. So we can do that by projecting the dimensions in the graph. So ito yun. So project natin, meron na nakaproject dyan yung dito. So that is somewhat 38, no? So may kodigo ko kaya alam kung 38 dyan. In the lower boundary, so dito, that is 32. And then for the other side, so ito, 57. And dito sa lower boundary, we have 19. So after we have those value, pwede na natin siyang isolve. So in here we have 6. In here, yung magaling sa math. Hindi ako magaling. Ayoko mag-calculator. So solve natin para hindi naman sayang oras. Okay? So pwede kasi natin gamitin to, no? Itong part ng delta t with respect dun sa 38 minus 32 is equal to yung 1 minus delta t over 57 minus 19. Similar kasi yan eh. Yung triangles. So we will have a delta t that is 1.36. So kung titignan natin itong table, itong graph natin, pinag ko lang lahat, drawings, nasa pagitan siya ng, saan ba itong point na to? Nasa pagitan siya ng 3 at saka no 4 second. So dyan lang natin kukunin yung range. So that means ito yon, itong part na to yung 0.136 seconds. I-add lang natin siya dito sa 3 seconds. So that means yung critical gap natin, yung center of gravity, critical gap is 3.136 seconds. So that is the gap that vehicles will most likely accept. Yung parang katanggap-tanggap. Yung gap. Katanggap-tanggap. Okay? So clear natin. Okay, let's proceed, no? So is it possible to have an equal total number of gaps accepted and rejected para magawa natin yung kay Raf? Parang ganito. Na-spoil ko na kayo. Kasi kung meron tayong unbalanced na parang yung pakita natin dito, ganyan. So kailangan ba dapat ganyan, equal sila para magawa mo kay Raf? So nagtingin-tingin din ako, no? Kasi halos lahat ng mga examples na nakita ko, laging pinag-i-equal nila yung number accepted gap at saka rejected gaps. So I was curious kasi wala namang sinabi dun sa definition that they should have the same value. Kasi kapag ang ano kasi, hindi sila equal, most likely mas marami rejected. So yung table natin could become something like this, no? Kunyari, ginawa natin lahat ng rejected na record natin. Hindi sila magpapantay, no? Baka hanggang dito lang yung number of ano natin, accepted, yung number of rejected natin sobrang dami. And then that will give us a different critical gap. Okay? So, ginagawa kasi yung filtering na yon kapag ginagamit kasi yung mga iba't ibang klaseng concepts. So, iba kasi na critical gap, kinukuha lang nila for the number of accepted gaps, let's say 50%, that is yun yung kinukuha nilang critical gap. So, they somehow need to filter yung data na meron sila. Okay? So, nagtingin-tingin din ako, no? Most studies, they use this kind of filtering. Kung saan, ang tawag dito, pinagpapareho nila yung number of gaps accepted and rejected. So, while I was finding yung mga researches that could possibly use dong sa, kasi wala naman sa definition. So, in my mind, I think pwede naman, no? So, sa totoo lang, meron ako nakita. So, ibig sabihin, pwede nga siya, no? So, doon sa isang study ni Fitzpatrick, which is yung gaps accepted at stop-controlled intersections, Ito yung sinite ko yung gawa niya. So ito yung gap na pinakita niya, no? Gaps accepted at saka rejected. So makikita natin yung broken lines, the rejected gaps, the accepted gaps. So dito sa example natin na to, mas marami talaga yung rejected gaps kaysa sa accepted. And then doon niya binase yung study niya doon sa pagkuha ng critical gap, no, which is 8.5 seconds. So posible naman, no, na gawin ganyan yung study. It depends on what you're trying to prove or what you want to find out. Okay, so sample of gap acceptance data, no? So take note that the data in the table may vary depending on the needs of the study. For example, in this table, only the gap rejected was not collected, no? So makikita nyo, maraming nakalagay dyan, no? So depende kasi sa study. So you may opt to filter some of the yung mga data nandito sa table. So pwede mong tanggalin, no? Depende sa study. In this study, nakalagay lang dyan yung gap accepted to, hindi nakasulat, no? And then kinuha niya yung distance ng gap na yon because that's necessary for his study, no? So pwede naman nyo sa inyo, kunin nyo gap accepted and rejected for each cases, no? It's up to you. Okay? So this is an example para may idea kayo. And then let's have some short activity, no? So I have here some data set that you can use as parang exercise para makapag-solve tayo ng gap, no? So ito yung mga data niya. So medyo dinamihan ko. And then these data are not real world data, no? Gawa-gawa ko lang sila. So baka yung iba sabihin, saan lugar yan? Kung may magtatanong. Hindi naman siya kinuha in any place. Galing lang yan sa imahinasyon ko. So for this case, para mapabilis tayo, solve for the critical gap using the graphical method. Okay? So you can use Excel, no? Just type yung mga data natin and it will give you some time. So doon naman sa timetable, I think I gave it 15 minutes to do it. So during that time, you can just input these values in Excel. Okay? So sundan nyo yung pagkaka-format, no? Sa Excel. Pag tinype nyo to sa Excel, sundan nyo yung pagkaka-format. As in ganyan na ganyan. And then, para mapabilis, highlight nyo lang. And then, gawa nyo siya ng graph, itong tatlong to. Recommended graphs. Lilitaw kaagad siya. So, kahit hindi na siya parang as detailed, as long as you get the critical gap, okay na yan. Okay? Okay, so now let's try to solve it. No? Okay, so kung ako kasi meron naman akong copy nitong file na to and I was the one who made this table. So kaya ko siya copy paste sa Excel and then it will give me this graph. No? Okay, so if I were to do it graphically, madali lang. So kuha lang ako line, project ko lang downwards dun sa intersection nila. So makakuha na kaagad ako ng critical gap. So I will also set up yung mga requirements natin to solve it manually. So yan yung mga upper and lower boundaries. Ganun din sa kabila. Ayan. Okay, so if you want to solve for to determine the critical gap, so sagot this 6.3 seconds based on this data. So how about try natin naman na gawin ko siya manually. So habang may ginagawa kayo dyan, and hindi pa kayo tapos, I will try to do the best I can to solve this manually. Okay, so wish me luck. So, meron tayong hourglass figure dito. Okay. Kunyari, perfect siya. So, let's assume na yung upper boundary natin is approximately 90. Then, yung lower boundary natin is approximately sabihin natin 68. On the other side, we have sabihin natin mga around 104. Then lower boundary natin ay mga around 62. Okay. So ito assume natin this is a 1 full second. 1 second. And then yung dito, tawagin natin siyang delta t. Siyempre yung dito, tawagin natin siyang 1 minus delta t. So now, we just use the similar triangles. 90 minus 68 equals to yung 1 minus delta t over 104 minus 62. Makuha natin dyan yung delta t. Kuha lang tayong calculator. We solve. So nakuha ko is about 0.34 seconds. So now we just added yung critical gap is equals to, dahil nga yung boundary is around 6 and then dito 7 6 plus 0.344 plus 6.344 seconds. Okay? So, pwede tayong magkaiba ng konti, no? Kasi it's possible na yung values na yung approximated as your upper and lower boundaries magkaiba, no? Slightly. So, kung titingnan natin, magkalapit din naman dun sa nakuha natin critical gap. Okay? Okay, so that's the example. So you can have at least mga 5-minute break. So toilet break. So siguro nahirapan kayo dun sa sample problem natin and you want to go for a short break, PCR break man lang, mag-yosi break. You can do so. No? Okay, so I hope everyone's here. So let's proceed, no? So ito yung mga further readings na pwede nyo gamitin, no? So I think yung MST Connect provided you the presentation, so you can just browse it at your free time. So now we will start with the post-encroachment time. So post-encroachment time is the span between the moment the first traffic participant leaves the course of the second traffic participant and the second traffic participant enters the previous course of the first one. So parang napakahabang definition. Pwede dumugo na naman natin ilong. But don't worry, I have provided with an illustration. The illustration na to is for vehicles. So, posible rin naman to for pedestrians, no, and vehicles. So yung concept lang naman dito yung importante. Okay, so let's play. Okay, so ito yung, oops, na-cancel ko. So ito yung first part. So kung saan tumigil yung potential collision and then yung oras na bago makarating yung susunod na road user doon sa conflict point na yun. So ito, pause natin. Okay? Ba't napuputol doon? Ayan, potential collision point. So yung, pag meron ng nauna dyan, so bibilangin mo yung time na kung hanggang ilang segundo o seconds yung aabutin para makarating din siya on the same point. So that is what we call the post-encroachment time. Okay? So pwede rin yan sa pedestrians. No? Okay? So for example, meron tayong dito. No? So ginamit ko rito is kinagaya pa rin. So dito sa part na to, hindi rin nyo rin kailangan masyado ng video processing software. No? So this is for just illustration purposes. So katulad kanina, so meron tayong conflict area. And then, bisin lang natin konti. So magsiset din tayo dyan ulit ng timer. Yan. So i-measure natin yung post-encroachment time. No? So gumagalaw kasi yung camera ng konti. So medyo siya tumutumbok. So yan. Nakikita natin is the first road user. So ano ba yung second road user natin na posibleng dumaan dyan sa conflict area? So itong mga pedestrian na to. No? So pause natin. Then we can start with the timer. Okay. Matigil na naman. Hindi ko lang ba't napuputol pag pinapause ko. So start natin yung timer. Kasi yun yung post-encroachment time ng pinakaunang vehicle. And then dito, pause na naman natin. Kasi yan yung post-encroachment time ng vehicle na to. And then as we approach doon sa conflict area, yung pedestrian na reach niya na. So, makikita natin yung post-encroachment times ng dalawang vehicle. First vehicle na dumaan, ang post-encroachment time niya ay 6.12. Kasi during that time, yun yung inabot bago makarating yung pedestrian sa conflict area. And then, yung sumunod naman na vehicle is 2.08 seconds. Okay? So, inulit ko, hindi nyo kailangan dito ng very sophisticated processing software. So, kahit basta makita nyo lang yung conflict area and you have a stopwatch of any kind, so pwede nyo i-perform itong post-encroachment time. Okay, so example ng mga data na makukuha natin sa post-encroachment times. So, meron tayong mga ganito. So, yung sa kaliwa is speed. And then, yung dito, meron tayong mga post-encroachment time. No? Okay, so posible natin siyang cumulative frequency. So nakalimutan ko na ilagay ko ano tawag dito. No? So mga cumulative frequency ito. No? So parang ito total natin yung mga vehicles that had 0.5 na post-encroachment time. So meron tayo dito. So mga around 5 or somewhere. And then dito. So parang ito total lang natin siya until we reach 100%. So yung iba kasi ginagamit nila yan. So meron kasi mga studies that says that iba-iba to, no? Sinasabi nila yung mga post-encroachment time that is around 1 second or less are the more serious conflicts. And then meron din naman nagsasabi na 1.5 or less is a serious conflict. So depende pa rin sa study yan, no? And then yung mga iba is not so serious pero conflicts pa rin. So yung iba, ginagamit nila itong post-encroachment time to determine the frequency of accidents or even severity. Though yung severity medyo kine-question siya ng konti kasi hindi naman talaga nire-require yung speed doon sa pag-record ng post-encroachment time. No? So not necessarily nire-require siya. Doon kasi sa mga studies, it shows that speed plays a factor on the severity of accident. So pwede kasi tayo, yung vehicle is running very slow and can have a very short post-encroachment time. Okay, so it depends on the study, no? So, ganun din naman for all types of study, no? Some country may present a value for a certain kung ano yun, variable for a certain scenario, pero not necessarily applicable siya for all countries. Okay? So, example of graphs ng PET yan. So, sample of PET data. No? Take note that the data in the table may vary depending on the needs of the study. For example, dito, so nakalagay dyan yung PET and then ang kinukuha niya PET with respect to bicycles. So, yun yung nakalagay dun sa data niya. Okay? So, sa mga study, minsan kinoconsider niya yung PET. Kung severe ba yan, moderate, or low severity, depending on the PET. So, kasi yung PET kasi madali siyang kunin, no? Madali siyang i-extract yung mga data niya. And then, yung mga equipment na kailangan mo, hindi ganong ka-extensive. So, makikita naman natin yung mga advantages dyan, no? Ng PET dito. So, PET can be easily collected on site. So, pwede mo siyang gawin on site. You just need a stopwatch and then yung mga recording materials mo, no? Kahit pen and paper lang yan. But, kung sa site yan, medyo kailangan attentive ka. And then, it does not need, typo yan. It does not need a collision course. So, pakitandaan, no? Hindi niya kailangan ng collision course. That is a typo. It does not need a collision course, no? Ang collision course kasi, mahirap siyang makuha. So, in order to establish a collision course, kailangan ang road users, yung two road users should have a path that will cross. And if they don't change their speeds, they will meet at the same point and then they will potentially crash. So dito, it does not need to have a collision course. Kahit magkaiba yung speed nila, though magkasalubong sila, and then kahit ituloy-tuloy na yung speed, hindi sila magbabanggaan, so pwede mo pa rin gamitin yung PET. And then, it does not need any video processing software, but having, let's say, a video recording itself is already useful enough, no? And then when using a recorded video, camera angles, height, and clarity requirements are not that strict. So basta nakikita mo na maayos yung mga sasakyan, kahit tagilid pa yan, and then nakikita mo yung conflict area, and then kaya mong orasan. And so, you can already use that video. So, hindi siya strict. So, kaya marami pa rin yung gumagamit ng PET, no? Kasi in terms of gathering data, mas convenient siya para dun sa mga, di ba, nag-study, no? So, ito yung mga example ng mga research papers na gumamit ng PET. So, tignan na lang if you want to browse them, you can use these mga citations. So now let's go to traffic conflict analysis. No, I should have changed this to traffic conflict technique. Kaya lang kasi I think na-post na. So mas ano kasi siya mas dikit siya dun sa traffic conflict technique na. But analysis is already pretty close. So now let's continue. No. So sa traffic conflict analysis, so we need to first define what is a traffic conflict. So an observable definition, so in which two or more road users are about to occupy the same location at the same time if their movements remain unchanged. So for example, ito, meron tayong bus and then a car. So kunyari, tuloy-tuloy lang yung speed nila, hindi nila binago, pati itong car, tuloy-tuloy lang. So magme-meet sila rito sa this point, and that is a conflict. Pero kung itong car sobrang bilis niya, itong bus sobrang bagal niya, though even mag-meet sila at this point, there is no conflict. Kasi itong car, definitely mangyari, lalagpasan niya na muna to bago pa makarating doon yung bus. So what we have is just a post-encroachment time. There is no collision course, therefore no conflict. Okay? So not necessarily na meron mag-meet sila at one point, it's already a conflict. It should have a collision course, no? So that means na pag hindi nagbago yung speed nila, magbabanggaan sila. Okay? So parang ganito. Kunyari ito, hindi napansin na merong pedestrian doon, pwede niya yung mabangga. Causing an accident, no? Kunyari tuloy-tuloy lang siya. And then nabangga niya yung pedestrian. That's already conflict, no? And then those conflict could cause a chain reaction kung hindi niya change yung direction niya. Or hindi siya gumawa ng any evasive movements. Okay? Okay. So we have what we call the Swedish traffic conflict technique. So itong Swedish traffic conflict technique nisto, not necessarily originated from Swedish, no? So sabi nung isang research, originated from Detroit Motor Laboratory, and then na-refine lang, no, ng ng Sweden, no? So kaya naging Swedish traffic conflict technique. So according to the Swedish traffic conflict technique, a collision course is a necessary condition for a conflict. So nabanggit ko naman kanina. So collision course implies that unless one of the road users takes an evasive action, a collision will happen. So yung tinatawag dito is evasive action, no? Kailangan natin yan tandaan kasi that's a very important part of the Swedish traffic conflict technique. So the severity of a conflict is defined at the moment when one of the road users start taking an evasive action. Yun na naman, lumitaw na naman ang word na evasive action. So the road user who took an evasive action first is called the relevant road users. So when it comes to pedestrians and sa vehicles, yung pedestrians kasi medyo mahirap natin i-predict yung movement nila. No? Hindi natin alam kung nagkaroon na siya ng evasive action o hindi. So pwede natin i-assume na yung vehicles na lang yung titignan natin. No? So may mga ganong study na ginamit nila yun. Kung saan kinonsider lang nila yung vehicle as the relevant road user. No? Siya yung gagawa ng evasive action. Okay? So conflict severity is based on two indicators. No? So time to accident, which is the time remaining to a collision when the evasive action, so nandun na naman yung word na evasive action, is taken by the relevant road user. So road user, yung unang gumawa na evasive action, no? And then conflicting speed, the speed of the relevant road user when she or she takes the evasive action. So, yung bilis, no? So, time and speed lang yan, dalawa. So, siguro narinig nyo na yung time to accident at saka time to collision. So, pares lang ba sila? So, the answer is, they have similarities. But technically, they're not the same. So, hindi parehas yung time to accident, time to collision, no? So, they have some differences between them. But they are sometimes used interchangeably because sometimes yung time to accident mismo, as in the time itself, it's possible to be equal to the time to collision, no? Okay? So, para ma-explain natin kung ano yung pagkakaiba ng time to accident, time to collision, no? So, ito yung, meron tayo ritong example, no? So, ito. So, in this case, time to accident, time to collision yung pinakita, no? So, pag time to collision na yan, so let's say this is vehicles na naman to, no? Kasi mas familiar tayo dyan, no? Mas madaling i-explain. So, let's say this is a time-space diagram na naman. So, ito yung pumasok yung isang vehicle, dito pumasok yung isang vehicle, no? At this point, no? So, dito, so as we go on in time, so at time dito, sa time na to, makikita natin, mag-meet sila, no? They are on the same space at the same time. So, ibig sabihin, hindi naman pwedeng sabay silang nandoon na nakapatong sila sa isa't isa. So, ibig sabihin, magkakaroon sila ng potential collision. So, looking at this table, meron tayong part dyan, no? Kunyari ito, yung slope nito, this is the speed, no? Kung hindi niya to binago, hindi siya nagkaroon ng ganitong klaseng path, hindi niya sinundan yon yung path, itong speed profile na yan, kung tinuloy-tuloy niya, minintay niya yung speed na yon, so that is already a collision. So the moment na nagkaroon tayo ng collision course, doon, kunyari dito sa part na to, yun yung tinatawag nating time to collision. Okay? Sir, di ba evasive action yun? Posible, no? Posible siya. So, pwede mo rin sabihin na time to accident dyan. Kung sinabi nga natin, sir, evasive action yun na. Time to accident siya. Kasi evasive siya. So, however, one difference between time to accident and time to collision is that the reaction they make during the collision course, no? So, yung time to collision kasi, it takes into consideration yung tinatawag nating reaction time ng driver. So, normally when we study yung parang braking distance, no? Meron dyan na factor that is yung parang reaction time, yung parang yung time, parang yung nandyan yung factor niya yung so parang yung reaction time, and then meron din tayo yung parang assume natin constant speed lang tayo, no? Sabihin na natin V, so ito reaction time yan, no? So kung kukunin natin yung parang braking distance plus yung ano natin, no? Yung total braking distance natin, yung dito yung stopping sight distance natin, kailangan din natin yung parang braking distance, no? So kunin natin yung parang total stopping sight distance natin. So parang dito yung reaction time tapos yung braking distance. And then yung pag-brake mo dito, gradual to a stop. Hindi naman siya instant. So parang ganito yung assumption doon sa time to collision. However, sa time to accident, itong part ng reaction time is not necessarily considered. Parang very short na lang yung time niya para mag-react doon sa potential collision. So that means a very short in time, ang pagbe-brake niya is very abrupt, or pwede niya sabihin na hindi man nga siya mag-brake. He can opt to accelerate. So let's say for example dito, kung i-assume natin ito, this is a very gradual change in speed, no? Kasi kung titignan natin, curve pa yan. Parang dahan-dahan siya ng speed, umalis siya dun sa collision course. Pero kung ang nangyari, ganito, kasi malayo pa lang, na gano'n na siya eh. Simula pa lang ng collision course, iniwasan niya na. Okay? Pero kung nangyari dyan, sinundan mo yung collision course, and then malapit ka na, and then doon mo palang nakita itong road user, parang magbabanggaan kayo. Kunyari, nandito na siya. At point in time, konti na lang magbabanggaan na tayo. Ang ginawa mo, lumis ka, binagalang mo yung sarili mo. Todo. Kung makikita mo yung change ng speed mo dyan, parang nag-todo brake ka, parang paganto ka. So, abrupt. So, meron tayong abrupt change in speed. Okay? So, yung pagbe-brake mo dyan, hindi siya gradual. Kasi instant. Parang pinadyakan mo yung brake mo ng todo. Or even, you accelerated fully. Kasi ito, hindi naman kunyari, hindi siya nag-take na evasive action, tuloy-tuloy lang siya doon. So, posible rin na, yung nandito na siya, ginawa mo, pinilisan mo lalo. Pinakabilis mo yung speed mo. So, naging steep yung speed profile mo. Okay? So, yun yung tinatawag nating pagkakaiba ng time to accident and then time to collision. So, posible rin na nag-swerve ka para maiwasan mo siya. Okay? So, yun yung mga possible na scenario. So, yun yung difference between time to collision. Sa time to collision kasi, ganito. Sa time to collision din kasi, mula rito sa point na to, time to collision, tuloy-tuloy siya nare-record. But time to accident, yung time na yun, nare-record lang siya once, no? Isang beses ka lang gagawa ng evasive action. Pero itong time to collision, tuloy-tuloy yan. Kunyari, this is the collision course, and then finalo niya. Ang time to collision decreases the closer yung proximity mo dun sa point na to, no? Dito sa point na to, no? The closer you are, time to collision pa rin yan. And then, yung change niya ng kunyari, umalis na siya sa collision course, gradual. Kasi tinake on consideration naman ng driver yung yung reaction time niya, and then yung speed niya. So pwede siya, meron siyang enough time, no? To do para maiwasan yung yung collision course. So hindi abrupt yung change kasi naka-factor doon yung reaction time niya, no? So yun yung pinagkaiba. So this is still, kung ganito yung ginawa niya, this is still na time to collision pa rin yan. So, some studies kasi, nire-record nila the mere fact na nagkaroon na ng collision course. And then there's also studies that nag-record siya, nire-record nila yung until na umalis siya doon sa collision course. So time to collision. So, but in the Swedish traffic technique, if you are only observing the site, it's very difficult to know if there is a collision course. Okay? So, kung gusto mo malaman kung merong collision course talaga, you need a video processing software. Napakahirap i-determine. Let's say by eye, nasabihin mo nasa collision course na yung vehicles. Kaya yung traffic conflict technique na using time to accident is very useful. Kasi kahit hindi mo alam na merong collision course, pwede kang mag-assume ng collision course. Okay? So, paano yun? So, yan. So, if road users are not in a collision course, there is no possibility of an accident. So, obviously, kung wala nga, di ba? Hindi sila mag-meet eh. Hence, a precondition of collision course was assumed when an evasive action was taken by a road user. So, ibig sabihin, kahit sabihin natin na basta nagkaroon lang ng evasive action, yung road user, most likely the driver, sabihin na pwede na natin kaagad siya i-consider na nasa collision course siya. Okay? Kung hinahanap kasi rito is time to collision, kailangan alam mo simula pa lang kung meron ng collision course. And napakahirap nun eh. Okay? Mahirap i-determine. Lalo na kung wala kang time space diagram na kinukuha yung position and then yung time in real time. No? So this means that even in reality, if in reality there is no collision course, but the road user still made an evasive action, it will be assumed as if there is a collision course. So ibig sabihin, kahit nandun ka lang sa site, pwede mong kunin yung time to accident. No? So hindi mo na kailangan ng software talaga na very sophisticated. So example nun kung saan ginamit yung ganung klaseng assumption. So dito, so pakibasa na lang if you want to take a look. And then let's proceed. So now we have the advantage of using the Swedish traffic conflict technique. So traffic conflicts are much more frequent compared to accidents. So nabanggit din natin yung sa disadvantages ng ano, di ba? Ng historical data. So mas madali tayo makakuha ng number of sample size, no? Compared dun sa accident. Kasi nga accident, they are very frequent, no? And they do not happen regularly. Wala silang pattern talaga, no? So instead of waiting for years to get accidental records, the data can be collected during much shorter time. So traffic conflicts are actually observed, and thus much more information becomes available compared to what can be read in accident reports. So na-mention din natin kanina, accident reports are not necessarily made by engineers. So yung nandun is most likely, possible may part tayo ma-extract, but yung mga data doon not necessarily 100% engineer friendly. Kasi it's more on law enforcement friendly. Kasi sila yung kumuha, syempre, mas related sa field nila yung nandun. So traffic conflict studies are proactive, meaning that the safety problem can be detected and addressed before the actual accidents occur. Okay. So lalong-lalo na kapag yung mga accidents go unreported and unrecorded. So kung wala kayong records, hindi ibig sabihin na safe na agad yung isang lugar. Some people may be talking that this is an accident-prone area, but you have no proof to do that. So you may consider conducting traffic conflict analysis on that area para ma-determine na meron nga na nangyayaring ganong klaseng potential accidents, no? So however, meron din tayong tinatawag na disadvantage, no, ng traffic conflict technique. So this method requires trained personnel. Equipment personnel yan, no? Equipment for video recording and tools for video processing. Okay? So, for example, no, though hindi natin, let's say, kailangan yung collision course, kasi nga, pwede na natin eliminate yung video processing, pero unang-una, kailangan yung personnel mo. Alam niya i-determine kung nagkaroon nga ng evasive action, no? Yung vehicle. Dapat meron siya, mas ma-determine niya kung todo speed up ba siya, todo slow down, nag-swerve ba siya ng matindi. Okay? And then yung equipment for video recording, kasi most likely, mas maganda talaga siya i-video recording. If you're taking a look at the manual ng Swedish traffic conflict, nire-require ka pa niyang i-drawing yung scenario. Though, hindi naman kasi frequent na nangyayari yung accident na yung scenario na kailangan mo yung TCT, may time ka pa para mag-drawing. Pero kasi kung habang ginagawa mo yung data na yun, meron na nangyari ulit, so wala ka ng time. No? And then video processing kasi is much easier to determine the speed. Importante, though hindi natin kailangan makuha yung let's say na yung collision course, kunyari meron ka lang free software na gagamitin mo for video processing, yung speed pa rin kailangan. So dapat trained. Yung iba kasing trained personnel, meron lang silang table na susundan and use that to approximate the time to accident at saka yung conflicting speed, no? Mamaya papakita ko yung tables, no? So collection of conflict data requires work in field or processing of video to identify conflicts. So our accident records are already there, seen from a practitioner perspective, no? So kailangan mo pa siyang i-process. Okay? Hindi naman kaagad na nakuha mo na kapag na-videohan mo. Okay? So yung accident records kasi, kukunin mo na lang, nandun na. Ikaw, i-extract mo pa, ipaprocess mo pa yung nakuha mong data. No? So yun naman yung advantages. Let's say yung mga accident records, meron talagang records. And then maganda yung records na pagkakakolect. So pwede mo na kagad siyang gamitin. Nandun na. Pero ito, ipaprocess mo pa. So the relation between accidents and conflicts is not always clear for all types of conflicts. Conversion of observed conflict into expected number accidents is not very accurate. So kung gagamitin mo kasi na pang-predict ng number of accidents yung uh, results ng traffic conflicts natin o traffic conflict techniques, so medyo mahirap. It's not always accurate. Unang-una kasi hindi naman talaga 100% recorded yung nandoon sa mga police data. May mga parts doon na hindi natin talaga ma-consider. And then, na-mention na nga rin natin na accidents are rare, no? And they're not very consistent. So, hindi natin siya pwedeng gamitin talaga or kung gagamitin natin, hindi siya magandang result, no? Kung pang-predict natin ng mga possible future accidents. And then traffic conflict studies are primarily made during daytime and in good weather conditions. However, this is only for manual, no? Kasi nung previous, matagal na kasi to, no? Mga around 19-somethings. 19, basta 19th century. So, nung part na to, kaya lang, yung merong panahon, nagpo-progress na yung technology, pwede na maging automated or pwede na tayong gumamit ng video processing na softwares para mapadali yung trabaho. So, madilim man o hindi, so kaya pa rin gawin yung traffic conflict. So, itong last part na to, hindi na siya ganun ka-importante. Pwede mo na nga siyang tanggalin dun sa mga disadvantage. Okay? So, this is severity na. Pedestrian severity yan. So, in pedestrian severity, ganito, no? Meron tayong pyramid na tinitignan. Though itong pedestrian severity is still related to traffic conflict technique or analysis. So, ito yung mga pyramid natin. So, makikita nyo yung pyramid dito from a much larger base, palit ng paliit. So, that represents the frequency. No? Mas malaki yung base, kunyari yung safe interactions, mas common na nangyayari. However, as we go towards the top of the pyramid, mas nagiging serious, no? Yung type of accidents na nangyayari. Okay? And then, makikita natin dyan, though mas serious, less frequent naman siya nangyayari. So the relationship between accidents, severity of accidents and conflicts is parang inverse siya, no? So the more serious or severe the accidents, the lesser the frequency. And the fewer the frequency, the more severe. No? Parang ano lang siya. So meron tayo rito, frequency. So the higher the frequency, the lower yung severity natin. That's the common trend, no? Okay, so ito yung ginagamit natin na data, no? So for trained na traffic personnel na magkakandak ng traffic conflict technique. Because for a trained individual, o kunyari on-site, kaya niyang tansyahin, no? Yung mga tawag dito, yung distance at saka yung speed. Kaya kailangan ng very trained individual para mapabilis, kunyari, actual yung gagamitin natin analysis. So let's say, for example, dito, 2.8, nakita niya, parang 2.8 yung bilis and then 0.5 gumawa siya ng evasive action, makukuha niya kagad yung time to accident nang hindi gumagamit ng any software or spreadsheet. Kukunin niya lang kagad dito. Though, kung may calculator ka, may time ka mag-calculate, basta kukunin mo lang is 5 meters, divide mo lang siya sa 2.8, makukuha mo na tong time to accident. But it takes time, no? Kung nasa field ka, time is essential. So nakita mo, kaya mo tansyahin yung bilis. So pwede ka na kagad dumiretso dito sa table. Kunin mo na kagad yung speed at saka yung distance para makuha mo yung time. Okay? So kunyari dito, ito kasi naka-round off lang naman yan sa nearest value. No? Round off ka lang. Pero on site, tingin lang. So yung distance, siguro, memorize mo na yung distance. Say 6 meters and then natansya mo yung speed na 12. So pwede mo siyang sabihin na 0.5 yung time to accident. So bakit ba natin kinukuha itong speed at saka yung time to accident? So kung babalikan natin yung kanina sa traffic conflict technique, meron tayong dalawang factors na kino-consider, which is the conflicting speed at saka yung time to accident. So kinukuha natin yun para ma-plot natin siya dito sa table na to. So this table is taken from the traffic conflict technique na manual. So makikita nyo, napaka-serious. Kasi paano natin masabing serious? Spelling pa lang, kinabahan na. Okay, dito serious din. Okay? So makikita natin dyan, as the lower yung time to accident, and also the higher the speed, the more serious is the conflict. No? So kinakategorize lang natin siya kung serious or non-serious. We cannot classify kung namatay, na-injure yung mga ano dito. We just classify it as serious. No? So yung mo pwede natin consider serious, yung namatay, na-injured, yung mga conflict na mga ganon. No? So makikita natin yon dito. So let's say for example, meron tayong time to accident that is equal to 1 second. So i-project mo lang yon. Try natin i-project. So 1 second. Project lang natin dito. So anywhere dyan. And then yung bilis mo siguro nung nagkaroon doon ng accident, yung conflicting speed niya is 50. So mga dito. So mga around 27 yung ano natin. Dito eh. So mga nasa boundary pa siya ng 27. So ibig sabihin, that is a serious conflict. So pwede natin siya i-categorize. Okay? So compared kasi dun sa PET na hindi natin kino-consider yung speed. So dito kasi, so may marami kasi study talaga na nagsasabi na yung speed is a very important factor to determine yung severity. So in this case, this is a severe or serious conflict. No? Though walang accident na nangyari, pero kung sakali nangyari man, matindi yung effect. So let's take a example, no? Dito. So clear ko lang yung drawings. So yan, nasa kaliwa, tignan natin. So that's the video. So try natin siya i-play, no? So i-track natin yung speed na yan. So ginamit ko rito Kinobeya pa rin. Though itong na to, hindi siya accurate, no? Gawa-gawa ko lang yung mga dimensions na yan. So gumawa lang ako ng 5 meters dito as parang baseline na dimension para ma-approximate na yung ibang dimension dito sa video file, no? So kunyari, itatrack ko tong yellow car, no, yung speed niya. So ganito kasi mangyari dyan, no? Parang babanggay niyan and then magkakaroon siya, magkakaroon ng collision, no? So let's say, let's ignore yung collision between vehicles and just focus on the collision between the pedestrian and the vehicle. So let's say, pag na-reach niya na tong dulong red points, which is dito, yan, dyan siya gumawa na, imbes na sa tinuloy-tuloy niya banggain, dyan siya gumawa ng evasive action. So let's say, nag-todo brake siya, or sabihin na lang natin, nag-swerve siya, no? Pumunta siya doon. Kunyari doon. So, for me, as a traffic conflict, kunyari, na nagre-record ng mga pangyayari, so, kukunin ko yung speed. So, the speed is 7 meters per second. So, i-convert natin yan. Pakita ko na lang. 7.5. Sayang naman yung time. 7 point. Ay, dito na lang. Masyadong bay natin yung kulay. So, 7.54 meters per second. Convert natin. So, 1,000 meters. 1 km. Kasi km dapat dito, km per hour. 3,600 seconds. An hour. Kumukuha natin dyan ay, kunin ko lang yung calculator ko. Ah, 27.14. So, I hope I'm correct. Kilometers. Okay, kilometers per hour. 7.14. So let's try to plot that here, no? Kunyari ito yun. Kasama ko din yan. Rule. Kunyari ito yun. Tuloy-tuloy. Kung saan nagtatama. Then kunin natin yung time. So, para makuha yung time, yung 2.87, alam naman natin sabihin, speed is equals to distance over time. So, masasabi natin na yung time is equals to distance over speed. So, yung distance natin is 2.87 meters divided by dun sa 7.54 meters per second. So, makakuha tayo dyan ng 0.38 seconds. Napakababa. Sabihin natin na ito yun. Okay? Example lang yan. Project natin. So mga around 27 yung severity. So that is a serious conflict. Kasi posible na ma-injure yung pedestrian na yon or mamatay siya. Okay? So meron kasi maghanap ng mga video sa internet na meron talagang magandang angle. Dito kasi sa ganitong mga studies, na kunyari gagamitan mo siya ng mga video recordings, dapat yung angle steady, mataas. Sa manual, nakalagay mga around 8 meters in height. And then steady lang siya dun sa intersection. And then very clear na pwede mo i-measure yung distance. And then para madali, at saka clear din siya para madali mo makita kung kailan nangyari yung evasive action. So that is a very important ito. Compared mo kasi sa PET, hindi niya kailangan yung mga ganong klaseng requirements. Okay? So yun. It's clear. Yan, proceed natin ulit, no? Yun talaga yung dapat mangyari. Okay? So for further readings, so nandito yung mga pwede nyong gamitin yung mga reference. So lalo na itong Swedish Traffic Control Technique, Observer's Manual. So yan yung, nandyan lahat ng steps, no? So may mga siguro magtatanong kung gaano ba katagal yung kailangan yung i-video para ma-determine yung traffic conflict, yung kung safe ba siya or hindi. So sa totoo lang, walang exact time, no? Even the manual specified yung mga iba't ibang klaseng researches, pero hindi sila nag-agree sa isa't isa. So let's just agree that the longer the better, no? Yung pagka-accident. If you want to more detailed, kasi mahaba, di naman siya masyadong mahaba, pero kung isasama natin yung buong traffic conflict technique dito, hindi baka matagalan tayo. So itong manual na to, you can just find it in the internet if you want to expand your knowledge, no? Okay? So let's have a short quiz, no? So madali lang to. Para i-refresh lang natin yung mga pag-iisip natin, no? So it is defined as the time difference between two successive pedestrians taken from the moment the first pedestrian has cleared the conflict area until the second one reaches the conflict area. So 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. May sagot? Very good. So parang si Dora lang tayo niyan. Ang sagot dyan ay gap. Click. So gap yung sagot dyan. No? Very good. I think lahat naman nakuha. And then number 2, in terms of interaction between road users, the more severe the conflicts, the more frequent it occurs. No? Ano kaya yung sagot dyan? Oh, may iba may sagot na. Okay, so kung parang babalikan natin, pyramid, dito. Sabi doon sa pyramid, the higher the frequency, siyempre, the lower yung severity, no? So ito, mas marami dito ang frequency dito sa ibaba. So that means that is low severity. So the more severe the conflicts, the more frequent it occurs. Siyempre, the answer is false. No? Okay. And then, the higher the time accident, for number 3, the time to accident, the more severe is the accident. So, kung babalikan natin yung table kanina, dito yung mga time to accident, and then meron siyang mga parang mga rings determining yung severity. So, makikita natin na kapag nag-move siya to the right or the higher time to accident, nagiging less serious yung accident. So, the answer here is the siyempre false. No? So, mas safe pa nga siya pag mas mababa yung time to accident mo. Then, number 4, the requirement of PET is that it should have a collision course, no? So, yung sa kanina, siguro kung hindi nila napakinggan, baka isagot nila true. Pero typo yon, no? So, the PET, it does not need a collision course, no? Hindi siya requirement. Okay? So, posible na nasa collision course sila, pero nung by the time na doon sila sa hindi na sila nag-meet. But it's possible na merong collision course, pero it's not a requirement, no? So, kung yung kanina titignan niyo yung PowerPoint lang, baka sagot nila true. Kaya lang sinabi ko typo yon, so hindi siya true. So, false yan. Hindi naman talaga kailangan ng collision course. Possible na magkaroon, pero it's not a requirement. So, it is a well-known method to study the manner in which drivers move into a priority area where they must give way to other road users. Ano sagot kaya dyan? So, ang sagot dyan ay gap acceptance. No? Okay, so lahat naman natin nakuha eh. So, very good. No? Para tayong Dora the Explorer. Kahit hindi ko nakikita. Pero I appreciate you answering the short quiz. Okay. So, that's all for me. Now is for the question and answer portion. So, if you have any questions, so just give them here. So, this is a recorded video. So, if you have questions, just forward them here and I will just reply to them and give the reply to MST Connect so they can forward those answers to you. So, I can forward those answers to you, no? So, thank you very much for listening. I hope you learned a lot, no? So this is also very informative because I have to refresh my knowledge regarding these topics. So this both a learning experience for you and for me. And I hope I'll see you again next time. So good day, everyone. And see you all when I see you.